Welcome to the Music Travel Guide podcast. My name is Michael Piardi. I'm your host, and each month I bring you stories, insights, and guidance, actionable tips and strategies to help you grow your music career and navigate today's challenging music industry through powerful conversations, through interviews with established artists, musicians, singer-songwriters, music producers, poets, founders, and music industry experts as well. And I'm really excited about today's episode because it takes me back to my hometown. I recently had the chance to be there, Mantova, and I had the chance to meet saxophonist, composer, and bandleader Immanuel Wilkins during the first concert of the 45th edition of Mantova Jazz, one of Europe's longest running, most prestigious jazz festivals, which continues through the end of November. So if you happen to be there or you're planning to visit Italy, especially north of Italy, I highly suggest you go there, visit the festival, and of course the city as well. So speaking of, a huge thank you to the festival's artistic director, Mirko De Cas, for making this conversation possible. Immanuel is one of the most distinctive voices in today's jazz scene, not only for his sound, but for how deeply I think he reflects on what it means to create, as well as expanding the language of jazz and spirituality and sound. And in this conversation, I'm really grateful for this exchange I had with Manuel. We dive into something that every creative person can relate to, that delicate, I can say, dance between concept and creation, between thinking about what your art means and actually making it happen. Immanuel mentioned in a past talk that when working on his album, The Seventh Hand, it was the first time he had the idea before the music. So in this episode, we explore what that means, how to move from theory into sound, and what happens when an idea begins to lead the music itself. So whether you are a musician, a composer, or independent artist building your own creative path, this one is an invitation to reflect on how you relate to your own process and how much trust it really takes to bring an idea to life. Now, without further delay, let's jump right into the conversation, and I hope you will enjoy it. One thing that really captured my attention is when you spoke about your album, not the latest one, but The Seventh Hand.
Yeah.
And specifically, how, for the first time, the idea came before the music. So you were talking about the contraposition between theorizing versus making, and making versus theorizing.
Yeah, totally.
Which I feel, coming from a place guiding independent artists and musicians, it is quite a challenge for them.
For sure.
Yeah. So many artists and musicians wrestle with that tension.
Definitely.
So how much to think rather how much to feel. How do you manage that? How do you go about it when it comes to thinking and then taking action?
You know, I think it really depends project to project. I think for the majority of my work, I tend to lead with intuition. I try to just kind of lead with the heart, lean into my own inclinations, whatever I think is kind of natural in the moment. And so usually when I'm writing, I try to think of the writing and the practice as the theory. That is my theory, you know?
Okay.
And then I think, because I think when I'm creating, I need to get lost in it. You know, I need to really forget about everything. I think that what's beautiful about music and language is that, like, it is the end. It's not a means to explain something. It is the means itself, you know, it is the end. So I think in the same way that, like, language can tell us things and like really illustrate emotions, I think music has that power. And so I think it's really important that we communicate first, even if that's a non-language communication. I think it's important that I'm communicating first, and then and then kind of the theory comes after that when it's time for me to add another layer to the practice. And I think a lot of my free time is just spent, thinking critically about the world and reading a lot. And I have a lot of critical heroes, So for me, once I finish a work, then I try to think about what the work does, and that's kind of the means, one of the ways that I kind of get at the theory. For the seventh hand specifically, I come up with the idea before I started writing, is what I was talking about in that interview. And I think that was a rare thing for me, but generally I tend to, I try to get lost in the practice first, and then the rap comes afterwards,
How did you feel delving first into the theorizing thing when it comes to the seventh hand? Was it challenge? I imagine it was a new thing for you, as you said. Yeah.
No, it's totally challenging. I think it was interesting. It was challenging, but then after I had a pretty good skeleton of what I was doing, it flowed pretty easily after a while. After I kind of got into the practice of it, And also, it's funny, like challenging's relative, because they all, every time I write a piece of music, it feels challenging in a way. Like, it feels like a birthing process in a way, It feels like labor, And so I find that, I think both approaches, they have different challenges,
Of course.
I think when I'm theorizing first, I think the challenge is to make the natural organic art match the height of maybe what conceptually I'm thinking of, and then vice versa. Sometimes when I lead with the intuition and start writing first and go lean creative first, then it's challenging because now I have to theorize this in this way that matches the music, and sometimes that means not theorizing at all. Sometimes it's about really letting the piece speak for itself. I think about the tradition of jazz music, thinking about Charlie Parker songs. He never titled any of his songs. The producers would title his songs for him. And so I think there's something really beautiful about that bebop era in which the titles didn't even matter. The songs were about the work that was being done on the bandstand. It wasn't necessarily about explaining this larger concept. It wasn't the conceptual nature of the work was the work, And so I think sometimes there's no use in even writing music with this whole big conceptual art, because the music, it actually takes away from the conceptual rigor of the practice itself sometimes.
Wow.
In my opinion, I don't know.
Yeah. There's this kind of balance, which it sounds like that you always keep in mind, but at the same time, you also want to remind yourself that you want to be yourself.
Definitely, absolutely, yeah. And I try to keep it natural. If I think that music has the power to illustrate something, then I do it. And but also sometimes I'm just writing. Sometimes I'm just lost in my practice.
There's also another passage that really stood out to me. It is when you said there's more strength in the idea than in the practice itself.
Yeah.
Why is that for you?
Yeah,
because
man.
Personally, 90% of the time, I always go on the other part of the glass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So I focus myself on the making, on the taking the action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man.
So it was interesting to hear you saying there's strength in the idea itself.
Totally. Yeah, I think that sometimes with philosophy or theory or criticality or conceptual work, I think sometimes, I think it's important to name that sometimes the thing that I'm theorizing doesn't actually happen in the music. Sometimes I think, especially thinking of the seventh hand, this idea that by the seventh movement, we inhabit the state of the vessel, right? I think that this is a really good provocation, and I think that it does happen from time to time, but I think it would be a lie for me to say that it happens every time we play that piece. I think it's an aspiration, and I think we get closer in the attempt of that. I think that that sort of struggle to that place is what I'm really interested in more than the actual execution. I guess maybe if I were to rephrase that thing that you quoted of me, I wonder if what I really meant was that the execution isn't what matters, but the actual ascent to the execution is what I'm really interested in.
The intention, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Like the idea of it is what I'm trying to get at more than the product. You know, it's really about process, and it's like these ideas. Sometimes I have ideas that are obtuse. You know, it's really a question. It's like, man, can the music do this? And I think about that even with this project now, Blues Blood, my newest project, where it's like, I wonder if the music can be a lens for ancestral memory. You know, can it be? Is my question. You know, and I think the piece and why I write music is just to create the conditions to examine it as a possibility, you know? And so in that way, I think the idea is really more important than the execution of said thing, you know? Who knows if it's possible, you know?
If you had to share one piece of advice to any independent artists and musicians out there when it comes to creating themselves in a way that they can balance execution while build themselves in thinking about creating a piece of music, what would it be for you? What would you say to them first?
Totally. I think for my own practice and how I've kind of created a language for myself, and then also thinking about my heroes and the people who have really inspired my work, I think the real thing that I find to be helpful is that it seems like everyone is trying to fill a void. You know, it's really like creating work that is powerful and has the potential for change is often about being in service. You know, a great drummer, a friend of mine, Jonathan Blake, he always says we work in the service industry. You know, we're just like any other worker in the service industry. You know, and I think like this idea that like the music actually has to fulfill a void, you know, and so finding a purpose for the music is really important for me. It's like finding, like, man, is there a hole in which I can fill? Is there something that hasn't been done yet that I can give to the world, you know? And that could be anything. That can be extra musical, that can be outside of the music, or it can be musical, you know? And I think that in the ways that I imagine my improvisational practice, my compositional practice, as well as just my humanitarian practice, I think it's really about service. What is the void of the sound? What is the void of a compositional sound? What is the void of, you know, the universe, you know? And so how can we help fill these gaps, you know?
Wow, powerful.
Thanks, man.
What does service mean to you in the realm of music, and specifically in the realm of jazz?
Yeah, I mean, man, I think one of the one of the beautiful things about the inner workings of jazz music is that like there's always this like everyday practice of care on the bandstand. I think with jazz music, it's a great illustration for just how to work together, because you have, you know, at the least 3 people improvising all together at one point, right? And at that point, it becomes this idea of retaining this information that you're hearing, but then also responding and resisting some of it too. And so it's always this thing of like, well, man, did you have enough? Did you have enough? It's almost like playing with 3 people is like eating a meal with 3 people, right? Where you're constantly worrying if your friend that you're eating with has had enough food, right? It's a similar thing to being on the bandstand where we're here and we're making sure that everyone has enough chance to self-individuate, right? And I think that's one way that we're kind of in service to each other on the bandstand. It's this kind of microcosm of servitude for each other. And then I think the power of music is the same. It's sustenance. You know, I think one of the beautiful things about being a musician is that we have the opportunity to heal ourselves. People come to shows to to be transformed, to be healed by music, right? And we can kind of wake up. I think the blessing is we can wake up and play the piano in our house or play the saxophone in our house and do that to ourselves, you know? And so I think it's important that we share that in service. And then wider than that, I think one of my conceptual ideas and projects over the years has been through using the bandstand and using the platform that I have as concrete service. So when we do this project, Blues Blood, a lot of the times we have a cook on stage. And so I'm thinking about like the possibilities of actually feeding people, you know? Wow. And so like thinking about the music as this servitude or you know, being able to feed people musically, right, in this ephemeral way. But then also thinking about the potential of like the platform of the bandstand as a way of like real, actual outreach. And so, you know, what if we cook this meal on stage and then we ask performance and then we give it away to people who would like to eat a meal, you know, whether you're experiencing food insecurity or you're just wanting a hot meal, you're a college student, you can't afford, you know, whatever. Here's a nice hot meal that we cooked on stage, you know. So I think there's so many tiers and levels in which we can be of service in the music or just as humans, you know.
Absolutely. That was Immanuel Wilkins, and I wanted to thank again Immanuel for taking the time to be with me and create this conversation, which I really enjoyed. So the conversation again was recorded here in Mantova during the 45th edition of Mantova Jazz. What this conversation brought up for you. So here's a question I would love to leave you with. What does trusting your process, your creative process, look like for you right now? Is it about, for example, letting go of control, following an idea, even when you don't know where it leads, which is okay. There's no problem with it. I think it's part of anyone exploring the beauty of the unknown, creating something. So this is my invitation to take a moment to think about it, and if you feel inspired, I'm inviting you to share your thoughts with me. You can share your reflections with me in the YouTube comments in the case you enjoyed and you're hearing my voice through the Music Travel Guide YouTube channel, or reach out on Instagram or by email. When it comes to Instagram, you can follow me if you haven't at Music Travel Guide, or again by email. Can reach out to me at hello@musictravelguide.net. Anyway, you will find all the contacts below in the podcast description. I always love connecting and hearing your stories. And again, I would love to make the Music Travel Guide podcast a two-way conversation. So it is very important for me to invite you to talk about the episodes together. Now, thanks again for tuning in to the Music Travel Guide podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I am also inviting you to share it with another artist or musician who's in that same space you think might benefit from hearing today's episode with Immanuel, walking their own creative path. Now, I'll see you in the next one for another conversation. So until next time, keep creating, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep trusting your process.